You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense novels. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 56. For this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Shannon Baker. Shannon is the author of Strip Bare, which was the first in the Kate Fox mystery series. The second book, Dark Signal, is just been published on October 17th. That series is set in rural Nebraska cattle country, and although Shannon now lives in Tucson, she spent 20 years in the Nebraska Sandhills. She has been chosen the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Writer of the Year in 2014 and 2017, and she's a member of the Mystery Writers of America, Sisters in Crime, the Western Writers of America, International Thriller Writers, and the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers. Shannon also writes the Nora Abbott Mystery Series, and so we're going to be talking to her about her novels, her work process, and a lot more. So stay tuned for the latest episode of Meet the Thriller Author. Hi everybody, this is Alan Peterson, and I have Shannon Baker on Skype for an interview. I'm very excited to talk to Shannon about her work. How are you, Shannon?
I'm doing great, Alan. Thanks for having me. Hey, how is everything in San Francisco?
Oh, it's good. It's actually been kind of hot, because San Francisco, for being in California, doesn't really get that hot, and it's been really hot this summer, so we're suffering here because we don't even have air conditioning.
Well, I live in Tucson, and I'm a huge Husker fan because I'm from Nebraska. We watched the Husker game last Saturday, and it was hotter in Lincoln, Nebraska than it was here in Tucson, so that was kind of fun.
Wow, yeah, that is crazy. Tucson's a little bit cooler than Phoenix, right? It's not that bad?
Yeah, it is. It's usually, I don't know, maybe 5-10 degrees. Probably 5.
Oh,
but it cools off at night here, where it doesn't in Phoenix.
Yeah. So that's still, I didn't realize it got that hot in Tucson either. That's still very hot. Really excited to have you on the podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your writing history?
Sure. I spent 20 years in the Nebraska Sandhills, which is super, super rural. It's about as rural as you can get. I like to say that the population density is 0.95 people per square mile. And I wasn't native to that. I married into it, so it was very unusual. It was my mother-in-law, bless her heart, and I mean that in the Southern sense, told me what my priorities were when I was there. And she said, they are my grandchildren, they are my son, and then our business, which was a feed store, cattle feed. And if you have any time left over, then maybe you can do something creative like write, if you feel like it. And actually what she wanted me to do is join the Extension Club and do crafts. So I started writing, of course. That's exactly what I did. So that's how I started. It took a long time, but that's the background of it.
Sounds like more fun than crafts, I guess.
Yeah. Crafts are great for people, but not for me.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. My grandparents were from a small farming community in Minnesota, so it's very similar. What you were describing, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'm doing this we call it the double book blog tour with Jess Lowry. She's from Minnesota. And we're having a blast. She's so funny. And I just recently on one of our stops, someone was talking about, I'm from Minnesota. And I said, that's just Nebraska without the Huskers, right?
Yeah, maybe Nebraska's a little bit more flatter, maybe.
Yeah.
That's about it. Okay, so you have, we'll talk about your series here. You have Dark Signal, which is the second installment in this Kate Fox mystery series.
Uh-huh.
And that's going to be released October 17th. And so can you tell me a little bit about that series and Kate Fox?
Sure. Kate Fox lives in the Nebraska Sandhills, and she is absolutely nothing like me. She is a consummate insider. She's fourth generation, which means her ancestors were the first people to settle out there. She's got 8 brothers and sisters, and she's right in the middle of it all. And she really belongs there. That's exactly where she belongs, and she loves it. And she's very competent with all things rural. She can take care of cows. She can pull calves. She can fix fence. She can fix pickups. She's just very competent. And she was living out on a ranch. This is prior to the beginning of Stripped Bare, which is the first book. It came out last year. So she was living on a ranch, just doing everything she could, that she ever wanted to do. And it all fell apart one night when her husband, the sheriff, is shot and a local rancher's killed. And she finds out that the reason her husband was on the scene is because he was having an affair. So she has to deal with all of that, getting kicked off the ranch and the whole bit. So I hope it's not a spoiler, but when book 2 opens, she is the county sheriff.
That's an interesting twist.
Yeah. Getting there is the fun. So I hope readers will still read it because it does have some twists in it. So the second book opens when she's getting sworn in, and almost immediately there's a death on the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, and she's the only one who believes that it wasn't an accident. So she's got to stop the killer, of course, before he or she kills again.
Going back to the Stripped Bare, I read, I was reading on your website that it was praised as Longmire meets The Good Wife. Now that's a really cool eclectic mix. Did you see that connection when that was written?
I did. I love Craig Johnson and I love his books. If you haven't read the books and have only seen the TV show, you really should read his books because they're full of humor and turns of phrases that are just fabulous. And when I started reading his series, I thought, it gave me permission to write about rural Nebraska, and which I had wanted to do for a really long time. So that he kind of gave me permission, and the fact that it's a woman and the fact that she's got to deal with her husband's infidelity in a very public way kind of kicked it into the good wife type of thing. So I was really pleased with that.
So it seems like the Nebraska Sandhills is kind of like one of the main protagonists to the series. So kind of makes me think of what LA is to Rudy Bosch, Michael Connelly's series.
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Sandhills, for me, it was very much that way in my life. When I moved out there, it is not an obvious love. There aren't trees. It's just mile after mile after mile of rolling hills with grass. It's actually like a giant Sahara desert with grass. So it can feel really bleak. And I made when I moved out there, I wasn't used to it. And I married into it and moved out on this ranch. Our nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and they were an older couple. So I was really lonely. And I remember sitting on my waterbed, and that will date me right there, and just bawling and thinking, oh my God, I'd been married 2 months. I can't get divorced because that would really make me look like a flake. How am I going to deal with this? And I thought, well, you're going to have to learn to love the Sandhills. And so I set about doing that, and I did. And it when you start looking, it's beautiful. The grasses turn amazing colors in the fall, and there's 1,000 million birds out there. There's lots and lots of groundwater that comes up to the surface, so a lot of shallow lakes, and it just became some place I really, really loved. And then so this is I told you how rural it was. So our town was 300, and I had kids in high school and the whole bit. And after about 15 years, I found out my husband was having an affair, and had an affair for 5 years. So obviously, I'm not the brightest bulb in the chandelier, but so I escaped the Sandhills and went to a place that was way easier to love. But I always knew I wanted to write about the Sandhills because it's a unique place, and the characters are quirky, and there was, being an outsider, I could really get the humor in the, what outsiders wouldn't see. I mean, what insiders don't see. An outsider can say, well, that's unusual. And so it took me a little while to get my sense of humor back. And when I did, I really wanted to write about Kate.
So when you incorporated that, what happened with Kate, similar to what happened with in your situation, did you find that helpful for you as to write about it, or?
Oh God, they say living well is the best revenge, but yeah. I have discovered that writing well is pretty pretty sweet.
Yes, that's always it's so therapeutic to get your revenge on paper. That way you don't get in trouble.
Well, and so here's the thing. I have 2 kids, and they're really good about not kibitzing about us to each other. You know, my ex-husband and I. But so I'm not sure that he's read the book, although I did tell him it was coming out, and we kind of laughed about it. But so he lives on the path of totality from the eclipse, and one of my dearest friends is a scientist, and she called me up, and she's from Denver, and she said, who do you know that lives out there that I could go stay with to see the eclipse? And I said, well, just call my ex-husband. You know, they used to be friends. She hadn't talked to him for 16 years. And so she did. And so she went out to see, and bless her heart, this is the best friend in the whole wide world. I had given her an ARC, an advanced reader copy of Dark Signal. And she took it out there and was reading it in her spare time, and then just leaving it laying around the house.
That whole area in your books, you Grand County and Frog Creek, are those real locations, or are they based on?
The county I lived in was Grant with a T, and there isn't really a Frog Creek. There is a place very similar to that has a different name. So Hotchkiss is very much almost identical to Hyannis, Nebraska.
And do you hear any feedback from any Nebraskans who read your books, and what's the feedback been from them?
Well, the people out in this rural area that have read my books, that have talked to me about it, love it because they're my friends. The people that have read my books and got pissed off, now they aren't talking to me.
Yeah, well, I think it's always fun. Like I like reading those John Sanford books about Minnesota, because he's kind of writes rural. Some of them, the characters, some are in the Twin Cities, but Virgil Flowers is in the rural parts. And I think it's kind of fun because, you kind of like, oh, you really identify with that stuff.
Right. And Anne Lamott has, and I'm paraphrasing her here, when she says, you own your experience. And if the people don't like what you're writing about, they should have treated you better.
I like that. That's a really good philosophy to have. So what are your plans with Kate Fox? Is that, I know the second book isn't out yet, but are you planning to continue writing in that series?
So there is right now. Forge released a 99-cent short story. It's released digital on all platforms, and we love Kobo because it's indie. So you can check that out, but it's on all the platforms. And it's 26 pages, so it's really not that short. But so what a bargain! So it's the gateway drug to Kate. So if you want to find out about Kate Fox without investing in a whole book, you can invest in a 99-cent short story. So that's out and ready to go. It's called Close Enough. And then Dark Signal releases in October. Book 3 of the Kate series is, I don't have a contract for it yet, but it's with my editor. So, fingers crossed. I should be hearing about that any day. In the meantime, in 3 days from now, I will have finished revisions on a book that's really different than anything I've ever written. It's a kind of a challenge. It's very, very dark, and it's set in Tucson with Arizona Rangers. So
this is interesting.
Yeah, I'm real excited about that. We'll see if anybody wants to publish that one.
So it's darker than the Kate Fox or anything you've written before.
Right. In Kate Fox, I think there's quite a bit of humor in it, but maybe that's just me because I think it's a funny place to be. Now,
I noticed also you'd written the Nora Abbott Mysteries, and it says here that it featured a Hopi Indian mysticism and environmental issues. So I'm just kind of curious, what is Hopi Indian mysticism, and what was that series about? So
it's Hopi.
Hopi. Yeah, I know nothing about it.
Yeah, so they're a tribe in northern Arizona. So they are located on 3 mesas in northern Arizona, and they're one of the oldest cultures in the world. They inhabit the longest continually inhabited village in northern America, and they're very, very small and really, really poor. They believe that they're responsible for the balance of the entire world. So that if they don't do these ceremonies and do all these things required of them, the balance of the world will go out of balance. And because they have, like a lot of the tribes, they have, youth drain. And so they don't have the clans that they need to do all these. They believe that all the climate change and all these disasters that are happening and the social unrest rests on their shoulders. So it's a really interesting culture, and they're very secretive about everything, and rightly so, because a lot of their relics, their kachinas, we white people think that they're costumes, but to them they are real and alive, and they're their spirits. And so when the white men first came, they stole a bunch of these, and just within the last 5 years they've come up in auctions in like Paris and things. So they're secretive, and with good reason. And so of course that's who I decided I wanted to write about. So the first book of that series is set in Flagstaff, because when we moved there was a big controversy about man-made snow on the peaks that are sacred to 12 tribes, and the Hopi are one of them. The second book is set in Boulder, Colorado, and the third book is set in Moab, Utah. So those were really fun to write.
Those covers are beautiful. The colors with I'm looking at the covers on your website.
Yeah, I kind of liked them too.
Yeah, they're very nice. Yeah, I noticed that was published with an imprint of Llewellyn in St. Paul. I actually had interviewed for a publicist job there like 10, 15 years ago before I moved out to California.
Oh, really?
Yeah, small world. I didn't get the job, but small world.
They're a good publisher.
Yeah, it's very cool. The genres that they're in and everything was pretty neat.
Well, that's they because they are the biggest New Age publisher, and Midnight Ink is their mystery line. My first Tainted Mountain was the first book in that series, and I named it Sacred Balance because it just fit and it made so much sense. And it was the perfect title for that book because, the Hopi and the balance of the world and the whole bit. But they didn't go with that title because they said it sounded so much like their nonfiction line.
How is that? Were you disappointed then when you weren't able to use that title, or you just kind of said okay?
Yes, I am. I was disappointed because I am really, really bad at titles, super bad at titles, and that one was perfect. Yeah. But I have been all along disappointed in titles. The Kate Fox series, I thought I had this down. I figured I had solved the title problem. I wanted to have her. She was Kate Bear when I first started, Baer, and so I had Stripped Bear was Baer. And then Barely There and Bear Essentials and, everything using bear. And I thought, this is perfect. I will never have another problem with titles. But marketing at Forge decided that having it spelled differently would be confusing and readers wouldn't be able to find it if they started looking for it. And so they said, you can either change the title or you can change her name. And my editor decided to change her name. And I just thought, okay, that's fine. And then we changed the spelling back to where it should be, which is kind of weird. I didn't think about it at the time, but after it came out, I just keep getting all these teasing and everything about it being erotica. It's not erotica.
Oh, Strip Bear, yeah. Oh yeah, that's funny. All the behind the scenes stuff that goes on in getting a book out there. So what is your writing process then? Do you outline a lot, or you like the seat of your pants, or an in-betweener?
I used to outline in really detail. I used to have an Excel spreadsheet that had not only the action but the character arc and what every scene, the goal was, and it was all color coded, and that seemed to keep me sane, even though it changed a lot. But as I go, more and more books, I'm learning to trust myself more, and I outline less because I know it's going to change anyway. So I have the ending, and there are times when the ending changes, and that's fine. I don't mind that, but I like to know that I at least have one viable ending, and then the plot points, and then I just kind of go now. But when I'm writing a draft, I just gallop through it. I mean, I just start at page 1 and I go to the end. And when I change things, because I always do, I just make notes because it might change again or again and again. Mm-hmm. And there's no sense in going back and editing it if I'm going to keep going back and editing it. So when I get done with that draft, it's a huge mess, which is what I'm cleaning up right now. So then I do my revision, and then I have a final polish. So I usually do 3 to 4 drafts.
And what do you use to write? Do you use Word or another software?
I have Scrivener, and I use Scrivener for the corkboard. Mm-hmm. I need to figure out how to write in Scrivener. I just don't want to take the time to do it, because when I did start writing in Scrivener, I couldn't figure out how to export it and email it, like to a critique partner and stuff. So I just need to learn that. But other than that, I use Word. But I do use the corkboard. I love it.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Do you try to write every day?
Again, when I'm doing that first draft, I do, and then I'll take time off, and then when I do the revision, I do, because I don't want to lose that thread. But other than that, year round, no, I don't write every day. I probably should, but there's other things that I need to do. I love to hike and cycle and backpack and kayak and camp, and so when I get done with these big pushes, that's when I go out and do my running around.
And do you have like writing habits that you follow every time, like a lucky chair or a coffee shop they go to all the time? Or
oh, hell no. For me, it's a job. Yep. And you sit down and you do your job, wherever you need to be. My husband and I took a trip this summer, a road trip, and I was in the middle of that first draft, and so I was writing in the car going down the road. It's just, you just do what you need to do. And I have lived in some awful places where I didn't have any room to write. I do now, but you just you do what you need to do. Mm.
Okay, so now here comes a dreaded question in these interviews. Where do you get your story ideas? People always like, oh, that question, but I'm so curious about it. So do you is it like news-based, and then you work it into your world, or how does that come to you?
I am so frustrated about ideas, because all these writers, friends of mine, they'll go, oh, I have so many ideas, I'll never get them written. And I just want to punch them in the throat. I don't have so many ideas. I generally get an idea at a time. One at a time they come to me. Sometimes it's a struggle. Like I said, I really wanted to write about the Sandhills, and when it was time, Kate Fox came to me, and she came to me as a personality, fully formed, and I thought, the story kind of grew organically. I knew what I wanted, a few things, and it kind of grew. This story I'm working on now, the Arizona Rangers, really surprised me, because we went to the horse races here in Tucson, and it was my husband actually that went up and started talking to this guy, and he was an Arizona Ranger, and it just kind of struck me, they're all volunteer, and I thought, well, that would be interesting. And then when I started thinking about it, it was like unraveling a sweater, kind of. I pulled a thread, and I went after that, and it just grew and grew, and I'm real excited about this story.
And do you put in a lot of research then before you start to write your stories?
Not, I research because not only do I need to know a few things, but research also sparks more ideas. So when I knew I wanted to write about an Arizona Ranger, I called the Arizona Rangers here in Tucson and talked to their commander, and that kind of got me, going on a few ideas.
And were they friendly and welcoming? 'Cause sometimes you hear they don't want to help writers, and sometimes they're very helpful.
Oh, a friend of mine told me this probably 30 years ago. She said people love to talk about what they do. All you have to do is ask, and they love to talk about what they do.
Oh, what a concept to actually ask.
Yeah.
Instead of fretting about it.
I know, and I did for this Arizona Ranger story. I did fret about it for a really long time. I put off that phone call because it's kind of uncomfortable, and you don't want to go, I'm a writer.
Yeah, that's my fear too. That trying to make those calls like,
because it sounds so pretentious.
Yes.
I write books. You want to talk to me?
Before you started writing in these genres, were you a fan of them as a reader?
Oh my gosh, no. So when I grew up, I never read Nancy Drew. I have to admit, I've only listened to a couple Agatha Christie's on books on tape or audiobooks. That it just shows you how old I am, books on tape. But I occasionally I'd read a mystery. I never read mystery series, but I wrote what I thought was a thriller, and I sold it accidentally to Midnight Ink, and the editor there said, "Well, first of all, it's not a thriller; it's a mystery. And is this a standalone or is it a series?" And I said, well, it's a series, of course, obviously, which, then put me on a scramble. So for the last long time, let me see, when did I publish that? In 2013. I've been reading a lot of mysteries and a lot of mystery series. I'm never going to develop that canon that a lot of mystery writers have because I'm reading mostly contemporary stuff. So I am kind of a little slow on the, I didn't know who Nick and Nora were. There's just a lot of things I didn't know about the mystery genre, but I'm learning. I'm catching up.
That's pretty amazing too. Then that you started writing in it, and then that you sold it. That's pretty impressive.
yeah. And I just didn't realize there was rhythm and conventions that need to go with a mystery. So that it's taken me some time to figure that out.
Did you just start to write that first one, or did you read a lot of like how to write books, or?
Oh, you know what? I didn't publish my first book till I was 50. So between, 25 and 50, it was a constant learning curve. So I read a lot of books. I went to Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Conference every year, which I highly, highly recommend. It's in Denver. It's in September every year. It's just fabulous. When I first started out, I banged out a novel because I'd read novel all my life. I've been a reader. I banged out this novel, How Hard Can It Be? And then I sent it to, I did an online course because that's what we did way back then, in the snail mail, mailing manuscript back and forth with Writer's Digest. And that was my first kind of inkling that there was a lot to know about writing a novel.
Yeah. Wow, that's kind of cool though. So you could have came without knowing. You kind of learned as you went along. Maybe that was kind of the way to go.
I don't know any other way to do it. Because if you're a doctor or a lawyer or anything, you have to go to school and you have to learn and you have to practice. Why wouldn't that be the same for writers?
So that's really cool. You mentioned the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers, and I see that you were voted the Writer of the Year for 2017. Congrats! Well,
thank you. That was a big honor and a lot of fun.
So is that like writers? Are there? Is it like also like readers go to this convention too, or is it just?
No, it's just all writers.
It's all writers, okay.
All writers, and this year, this is the second year that Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers has also awarded an indie Writer of the Year. So there's a division for indie pubbed writers, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's great because a lot of the the more older established organizations or whatever kind of still look down at the indie writers. That's cool that they're welcoming them.
Oh man, indie writers are so savvy and so as a group, this group at Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers, they explained to me there's a big difference between self-pub and indie. And indie are the professionals that are really doing it right. And boy, they are savvy and they are on top of their game.
And so I noticed also you're going like on a pretty big tour. You're hitting several states and you're going to Canada. How does that work? And how much fun is that?
Well, this year it was kind of an accident, which because last year I made this big concerted effort. It was my first book with the Big Five and with Macmillan, and I thought, I don't want to mess up this opportunity. So I really went after it. I went after, did a lot of blogs and a lot of things. Worked really hard at getting, book signings and stuff like that. And did a lot of Barnes and Nobles, and I thought, well, this is the first year, and I'm not going to do so much the second year. And the Barnes and Nobles, I decided I really didn't want to do. That is so soul sucking. You just go and you sit and nobody comes in. And it's just terrible. So I wasn't going to even do a tour much. I was going to do a couple signings here in Arizona, and things just started coming to me. Hey, do you want to be on this panel at this conference, and would you like to come? A couple of the bookstores that I signed at last year, I sent them a little note that said I'm Dark Signal's coming out, and I got invitation. Hey, why don't you come back? And William Kent Kruger, who is multi times New York Times bestseller, gave me some advice, and he said, don't ever say no when you're starting out. Never say no. And so I just kept saying, sure, I'll do that. Sure. Mm-hmm. So, and then I ended up with this, I start in VoucherCon in less than 2 weeks, and I don't have a weekend home until the middle of December. But one of those weekends is Thanksgiving with my daughter up in Portland. But yeah, it just kind of happened this year. So I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, that's what I saw on your website. The tour schedule. I was like, wow, you're going to be very busy.
Which is why this big push to get this revision done before it all hits in 10 days. Yeah.
And so to listeners know, and I'll have links to it on the website and stuff, but for the people that are listening, your website is shannonbaker.com, shannon-baker.com.
Right.
And there's information there on your books and your book tours. So if anyone's listening in one of the spots that you're going to, go check it out. That'll be kind of fun.
I would love to see them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So if any listeners goes to see Shannon, let them know that you're from the podcast. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. Oh, that would be really cool. Yeah. And then in November, and I can't remember which day in November, the 4th, the 11th, something like that. Short story anthology is coming out from a publisher in Colorado, Hex Publishing. It's called Blood Business, and it just got a really good review on Kirkus. And I've got a short story in that, and half of the book is paranormal mysteries, and the other half is just straight mysteries. And so that'll be fun.
And so, okay, so before I let you go, is there any final thoughts that you would like to say to the listeners, or anything you want to share?
You don't think I've jawed enough on this thing?
Well, turn the mic over to you before I let you go.
I don't think I have another thing to add. I'm just really glad that you invited me on. So thanks.
Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it, and good luck with the new release and your book tour.
Okay, thanks, Alan.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Meet the Thriller Author. I'd like to ask you to please review and rate this podcast over on iTunes. It really helps me get the word out. If you take a few seconds of your time to do that, it would be much appreciated. You can also visit my website at thrillingreads.com/podcast for show notes on this episode, as well as information about the podcast in general. And you can also sign up for my mailing list there. You'll be getting special offers from our guests, as well as information, behind the scenes information on the podcast. And please do visit my author website at alanpeterson.com. I appreciate your support. And so until next episode, I will talk to you then.